Hi, I'm Miss Hall, and this is Lesson 75, Period and Vertical Translations of Sine and Cosine Functions. The graphs of y equals a sine b x minus h plus k and y equals a cosine b x minus h plus k represent translations of y equals a sine bx and y equals a cosine bx. The value of k indicates a translation up or down. The value of h indicates a translation left or right. A horizontal translation of a periodic function is called a phase shift. I want you to focus on these two formulas. And we've done a lot of translations before, so this should come back to you. Changing A is going to be a vertical stretch or shrink. And in these functions, sine and cosine, it's going to affect the amplitude. The amplitude is going to be the absolute value of A. B, I'm just going to point to it in one function, but B represents the same thing. That is going to be a horizontal stretch or shrink. And that'll affect the period. And the formula is 2 pi over b for the length of a period. And then we have h, which remember it's minus h, and that is a horizontal shift. And finally we have k, which is a vertical shift. Okay. And now we are going to, in the next two examples, graph sine and cosine functions. We're going to follow the 4 steps outlined below. Example 3, graphing a vertical translation. Graph g of x equals 2 sine 4x plus 3. So step number 1, identify the amplitude A. Here's the A value. So the amplitude is the absolute value of A. The absolute value of 2 is 2. We're going to identify the period. This is the B value, which is 4. So the period is 2 pi over B. 2 pi over 4 is really pi over 2. Identify the horizontal shift. There isn't one. Horizontal shift is 0. The graph doesn't move left or right. And the vertical shift is plus 3. So let me do vertical shift equals plus 3. Okay, that was step 1. Step 2, draw the horizontal line y equals k called the midline of the graph. Here's k. So the midline of the graph is going to be at y equals 3. I'm going to go ahead and cross out this 1, and I'm going to make this positive 3 and negative 3 for my scale. And I'm going to draw a dotted line, which is the midline. Okay. This graph has shifted up 3 units. So I'm going to picture that as my new axis as I have to draw this graph. That was step 2. Step 3, find the 5 key points by translating the key points of y equals a sine bx or y equals a cosine bx, horizontally h unit and vertically. Okay, so here is how I find the important points. I think in my head of sine of x at 0, 90, 180, 270, and 360. Sine, so these are the x values. If I draw a unit circle, okay, the sine of 0 is going to be that point right there, and it's always cosine comma sine. Cosine of that point is 1, sine is 0. So sine starts at 0, and then at 90 degrees, the y value is positive 1, and then it goes to 0, negative 1, 0. So that is a complete period of sine of x. But now my period is only pi over 2. So I need to put all of that information between x equals 0 and x equals pi over 2. A couple other things I can note as I'm about to graph it is the amplitude is 2. That means from the midline, the highest point will be 5, and the lowest point will be 2. It will be 1. Because the amplitude is how high above the midline or below the midline the function will go. And okay, so now what I have is to start. Sine of x at 0 is 0, but it's been translated up 3 units. So my first point is here. The last point in the period is also there. And the middle point, halfway between these points, is also 0. So halfway between these points is pi over 4. And now the sine function goes up first, and then it goes through 0 and goes to its minimum value. So the maximum value is going to be midway between 0 and pi over 4. And it's going to be up here at 5. And the minimum value is going to be midway between pi over 4 and pi over 2, and it's going to be down here at 1. And those are the 5 points. Now draw a graph through the 5 points. So this goes up, down, up. And here is a graph of g of x equals 2 sine 4x plus 3. You can see that the amplitude is 2. The half the distance between the minimum to the maximum is 2. So the amplitude, the period, it gets a complete sine cycle in the distance between 0 and pi over 2. Check. There hasn't been a horizontal shift left or right. Check. And there's been a vertical shift up 3 units. Right? The midline is at positive 3. Check. We're going to do one more graph, this time with a cosine function. So we'll begin by finding the amplitude, the period, horizontal shift, vertical shift. The amplitude is the absolute value of A, which is 2. So this amplitude is 2. The period is 2 pi over B. B is 1, so the period is 2 pi. Now we have the horizontal shift. Again, it is 0. And the vertical shift is negative 1. I will draw my axes. And now I will draw the midline. It's going to be at negative 1. The shift down 1 unit. With an amplitude of 2, the maximum I'm going to go is 2 units above the midline. So that's going to be the max. To make a note for myself, and the minimum is going to be 2 units below. And the period is 2 pi. So since there's no horizontal shift, I'm going to start my period here, and then I'm going to call this pi and this 2 pi. I can label further, which would make this 3 pi, this negative pi. But my period goes between 0 and 2 pi. So I need to get a whole one complete cycle in between those vertical bars. And now this is cosine, so I need to do a cheat sheet for me of the important cosine values. So that's 0, 90, 180, 270, 360. And now this is cosine of x. I draw the unit circle. I start at 0 degrees when the point is 1, 0, and that's cosine sine. So this is 1, and then cosine the x value goes to 0, and then it goes to -1, 0, 1. Okay, so my point, cosine, what am I trying to say? Cosine begins a cycle at the maximum value, goes and ends at the maximum value, so I can do that. The maximum value of cosine of x is 1, but because I have an amplitude of 2 and my midline is at -1, I go 2 units above -1 to get my maximum. So cosine cycle begins and ends at the maximum. And in between those 2 points, halfway in between, is the minimum, which is 2 units below the midline. And then halfway between, so this is the min, this is the max, and halfway between each of those is the 0, which is going to be the midline, because there's been a vertical shift, -1. So here's the midline, here's the midline. And I connect these 5 important points. And I have my graph of g of x equals 2 cosine x minus